Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Helen, and I'm a volunteer at the Paul and Stephen Spiritist Center. And today we will be talking about the topic changing attitudes. And before we start, we always like to connect with our spiritual mentors and guides. So if you want to accompany me, you can relax in your chairs and close your eyes. And as we take a deep breath and relax and calm our thoughts and center ourselves, we connect with our personal spiritual guide that some call the spiritual angel or the guardian angel. And as we connect with this spirit, we elevate our thoughts even further to the spirits responsible for the Paul and Stephen Spiritist Center. And as we elevate our thoughts even further to the higher spirits that are working towards Earth's progress, we ask for inspirations and guidance so we can truly reflect what's needed for us to change ourselves, change our attitudes, so we can grow and contribute to our lives and the lives of others around us. So stay with us. So be it. So for today's topic, which is changing attitudes, I used three of the five basic books of the Spiritist philosophy. So I'm using the Spirit's book, which is a book that really changed my life. The Gospel According to Spiritism, or As Explained by Spiritists. And Heaven and Hell, which is a view on what the spirits bring us about what truly is heaven and truly is hell, according to the Spiritist philosophy. In regards to the topic of changing attitudes, we're going to start looking at why it's important to change our attitudes. We're also going to see and link to how, or what does that involve? What does changing our attitude involve, and the consequences of that? The other thing we're going to see is how do we best approach the change in our attitudes? And finally, we're going to have a think of what will happen if we do not change our attitudes, if we continue to do things in the same way that we have always done. So we will cover all these topics, and so we can have a view of why it's so important to really look at ourselves and change our attitudes. So when we start with why it's important, if we look at the Spirit's book in question 132, where Kardec asked the higher spirits what was the purpose of incarnation. So do you know? What is the purpose of incarnation? Why do spirits incarnate? What's the goal behind this? And the higher spirits answer to Kardec in question 132 that there are two main purposes, or they can divide into two important aspects of why we incarnate. So the first one is really well known, which is to progress as spirits. And the second one that they say that is equally important is to collaborate in creation. So to be co-creators. So we have these two aspects of why we're here, like what's the purpose of incarnating. And if we look at the first one, which is to progress, and if we ask ourselves the question, how do we progress then? What is it that we have to do so we can grow? And they say that the purpose is to progress towards perfection. So how do we do that? If we look at another question in the Spirit's book, which is question 758, the Spirit's, it's related to the law of progress, this question, because the law of progress is a divine law. And the Spirits say that progress, it encompasses two aspects. So remember that the purpose of incarnation is to progress towards perfection. So to progress has two aspects, which is develop our intellect and develop our morals. So it's to grow intellectually and grow morally, which are symbolized by the two wings. So the wing of knowledge and the wing of moral and ethics. And that's what makes us grow and progress. In this part of the book as well, which is around question 758, I can't remember exactly which one, they say that it's possible for the person to develop intellectually, and you don't necessarily develop morally just because you developed intellectually, but it is important that we develop both aspects so we can actually progress. So if we look at that, and we know that we have to progress because that's our purpose, at one of our purposes, the other is contribute. So how do we progress morally? Have you ever asked yourself this question? What do I have to do to improve morally? I'll give you guys some time to think. Well, I'll tell you something, that in the past, and even these days, some people think that people progress through suffering, and that suffering was the cause of progress. And when we read throughout the Spiritist philosophy in the basic books, we will see that suffering is a trigger for us to progress. But it does not mean that you should purposely or want to suffer to progress, because that's not what the higher spirits bring us. So I selected 3 aspects of suffering and how that will help us progress. And it isn't suffering that causes progress necessarily. Like you want to suffer more because you will progress more. That's what some people used to think. And they would inflict suffering on themselves because they thought that that was the way to progress. But what we see from the Spiritist philosophy is that there are aspects of suffering that will help you progress. So nowadays, behavioral science and psychology and even life coaching or studying human behavior, we know that people grow the best or the quickest stepping out of what's called a comfort zone. So a comfort zone is when you're used to everything is set in your ways, and you feel very comfortable in that position. In this state, you normally don't progress very quickly. I don't mean intellectually. Even intellectually, I'll say that. When you're learning something new and you have to get out of your comfort zone, it brings a discomfort, doesn't it? So you never say, let's use driving. You don't know how to drive and you set yourself to learn how to drive. In the beginning, it's stressful. It's even painful to learn how to drive and pay attention to everything. But after you continue and you insist and you start to learn, then that will get easier and easier until it's in your comfort zone. So you grow when you step out of your comfort zone. So this is a kind of suffering that does bring progress. So if you're suffering because you're moving out of your comfort zone so you can grow and you can learn, that suffering will bring you progress in the way that we are intended to progress, isn't it? Which is intellectually and morally. The other thing is that might cause suffering or discomfort that it might be seen as suffering is when we are not growing and following the law of progress. So the law of progress, it's innate to us. Like we have that innate desire to grow and to become better. And if we're holding back from growing and becoming better, we don't know, but we feel a discomfort with that. And it might come from fear. I'm not going to look at why that happens, but if you stop in your progress, things become stagnant. I heard a person say once, and I really like this, that you're either green and growing or ripe and rotting. So you're either growing and fresh and looking forward and moving forward, or you're stagnant and that is deteriorating. So this not progressing, being really stagnant and fixed in your mindset, that does cause a suffering. And many people are in that situation and they do not know. They really don't know why they're feeling this emotional pain. And it's just because they are holding back on their development. And the other thing that I decided to bring was that when we are not flowing in the direction of the divine laws, like we're not going with the flow of the divine laws, we're going in the other direction, that causes discomfort or suffering. And the only reason that causes that is to bring us back into the direction of growth and of love and of the divine purpose. It's like that game, and I already said that in another video, it's like that game where you hide something and the children have to find it, and you say hot and cold, isn't it? So when they get closer, you say it's getting hotter, and when they're going away, it's getting colder. So I make that analogy with the divine laws and love. As we step away from the divine laws and from love, we suffer. And that suffering at some point will make us turn in the other direction and reflect what's happening. So that suffering also helps us grow, but not because of the suffering itself, but because of what it means. It will bring us to reflect and therefore steer our lives into the direction where we will find our happiness. So if we look at these three causes of suffering, so the ones that I said, which was this last one, we're moving away from the divine love and the divine laws. We're not progressing, so we're holding back. We're trying to stop progress within ourselves and sometimes even within our communities. We don't want change. And the last one, which one was, let me see. Let me just remember the first one that I said. Okay, not stepping out of the comfort zone. So if we look at these three, the way to step out of this suffering is changing our attitude. So if we're in our comfort zone, we have to change our attitudes towards attitudes that we might not have had before, because we're stepping out of a place that we know. And as we change our attitudes and adjust them, then we will grow and we will become happier. The same thing with the law of progress. If we are stagnant and if we want to stay in that same place and that's starting to be painful, we have to change our attitudes. The same thing if we're going in the wrong direction, like against the divine laws and against the divine love, the same thing. What we have to do is change attitudes. So changing our attitudes is what will cause us to move away from suffering. I'll say it again. So changing our attitude is what's going to help us move away from suffering. not because of anything else, then we are going towards the right direction for our progress and our growth, which is the goal, as I said initially, of our incarnation. So we saw why it's important and how we kind of moved towards that direction. So we identify why we're suffering and we start looking at changing our attitudes. But really, how do we change our attitudes? What does that involve? We might say, I don't know how to change my attitude towards this. So if we look at the Gospel in chapter 17 and item 8, the spirits talk about virtues. And I'm going to read because it's very succinct and it really tells us their understanding of what a virtue is. So the higher spirits say that in its highest expression, virtue encompasses all the essential qualities that comprise a good person. So that's a virtue. It's all the essential qualities of a good person. And that's where we start changing our attitudes to move towards virtue. And I'll explain. If we look at question number 1 of the Spirit's book, where Kardec asked the spirits, what is God? The spirits answered that God is the supreme intelligence, the first cause of all things. So if God is the first cause of all things, everything that comes from the Creator will have the signature or attributes of the Creator, isn't it? God in all perfection only creates perfect things. So in question 13, Kardec asked the spirits if we have a good understanding of what God's attributes are. And he makes a little list of things. And the spirits are going to tell Kardec that within our development level, what he's saying there is true. It's not complete because we don't have yet the comprehension of other aspects. However, what Kardec stated was correct for us at this moment. And there were 2 things that I'm going to bring to your attention. So if you look at question 13, you'll find this, all right, of the Spirit's book. So Kardec asks if part of the attributes is being sovereignly just and good. So is that an attribute of God? Like being sovereignly just and good? And the spirits say yes. Yes, in the supreme degree. And if it were different, it wouldn't be the Creator. It wouldn't be God. So if we see that God is sovereignly just and good, his creation will have that signature. So if we look at the virtues, we'll see that the virtues are actually a natural state of being. And you can put that to test if you make a list of virtues, or even if you want to close your eyes and see how you feel when I say these words, you'll see that even just listening to the words, it elevates your spirit. So you can make a list afterwards, but I'll repeat it here. So if you close your eyes and you think of truth and justice and harmony and beauty and peace and love, just listening to those words, they make something shine within us. And that's because virtues are natural, the natural state. And we are going towards that direction. And the closer we get to that, the happier we are. And we can find that information given by the higher spirits in several parts and several books of the Spiritist philosophy. But I'm going to use the Heaven and Hell, because it's not a book that I normally quote here, but there's some very interesting things in this book. And in chapter 7 of part 1, when Kardec is talking about what happens in your future life. So does what we do here today influence what's going to happen to us in our future life in the spiritual world? Because what happens is, in the past, we had no idea. We had beliefs that if we were good, we would go to a good place. If we were bad, we would go to a bad place. But there wasn't any in between. And when Kardec received this from the spirits themselves, coming back and communicating with them, he received orientation from the higher spirits, but he also got to interview some spirits like us in our level of evolution. And they would say what happened to them, how they lived their lives, and what happened to them after they passed and went to the spiritual world. And you can find that in this book, Heaven and Hell. And obviously you'll see that heaven and hell is a state of mind. And I'll read the exact definition that's given here in the book. So if we look at this chapter, which is chapter 7 of part 1, the spirits say that suffering depends on the amount of imperfections we have. And by imperfections, we mean being away from perfection. Okay, everything is created perfect. However, if we're away from perfection, that is called imperfection. Okay, so as we move towards perfection, we move towards happiness at the same time. So suffering is linked to our lack of development. And that's what you can find here in chapter 7 of part 1 of Heaven and Hell. And this is very interesting, and I'm going to read as well, that hell is wherever there are suffering souls in their understanding. Okay, so wherever there are suffering souls, that's hell. And wherever there is joyous souls, that's heaven. So it's not a confined place, but rather a state of mind and where you find that. Okay, so if we know that happiness and suffering are linked to our current developmental stage, what we have to do, and we learn that to change, to move away from suffering and towards happiness, we have to start changing our attitude, the way we understand things, and our beliefs. If we have beliefs that don't help us, that cause suffering, that's more linked to our ego than to spiritual reality, then we're going to be more towards suffering. But that can be changed as we change our attitudes, and then we walk away from that. So what are the consequences then from all that we said? What are the consequences of not changing our attitudes? Saying, look, no, I'm fine. I'm happy the way I am. It's too much work. I can't be bothered. What's going to happen? So what's going to happen is you're not moving out of your comfort zone. And remember, when we discussed that's one of the causes of us feeling discomfort and suffering. And the other thing is that we are holding back the law of progress within us. And that's another thing that we know that causes suffering, or pain or discomfort that we associate to suffering. And finally, it might be that we start moving away because we want to solve our problems and we don't know exactly how to do it. We might go towards things that really are just compensating our change, that we don't want to change. So we might do things that are hurtful to others and to ourselves. And that way we're going in the opposite direction of the divine laws, and that also causes suffering. So the consequences of not changing is discomfort and suffering. Why? Because naturally we're going towards perfection. And if we decide to stop or go the other way, that will cause a discomfort and suffering. So, our happiness depends on us changing our attitudes and beliefs and the way we understand things. Because to truly change attitudes, you must look at what you believe and how you view and understand the world. If I think that only people from my belief are good, that is a belief that doesn't help me. It might seem to me that it helps me, but it does not help me. So we have to change, we have to question that belief. Is that true? Is it that people that believe differently than me, are they better or worse than me? You're going to find out that that's not true. That we are all equal. All spirits are equal in importance to the eyes of the Creator. We're in different developmental stages, that's a fact. We're going through different experiences, that's also a fact. But no one is less or more important. It might be that we can contribute more, but to the eyes of the Creator, everyone is equally loved. That's what I was trying to say. So we have to change our attitudes until we find the attitudes that take us to happiness. And in our lives, that may show up in different aspects of our lives. So some part of our lives we might be getting it right. Some part of our lives we might need to adjust. Remember, we have to develop intellectually and morally. Even intellectually, we know that intelligence has multifacets. So you might be more intelligent or less intelligent to certain things. Same thing happens to morally. We grow in different aspects of our morality. So it might be that I'm very good at doing something, but I still lack in learning how to do other things. So we're learning in multiple aspects of our intellect and our morals. And what we have to do is work in a way that we're going in the direction of love. And that's why the golden rule is the golden rule. Love thy neighbor as thyself. So love self and love neighbors. So recapping, because it's almost time to finish, we were talking about changing attitudes and why it's important. It's important because of moral progress. It's the objective or purpose of our incarnation to grow morally and intellectually. And changing our attitudes will help us progress. And then we talked about what it involves. And it involves a change in understanding and adjusting the lens, let's say, of how we understand things. So we can understand suffering, the purpose of suffering, what suffering is and what suffering isn't. And do we have to suffer to grow? No. We can grow without suffering, but suffering might kick in as part of the growing process. Then how can we work towards new attitudes? By developing our virtues. And our virtues are what's natural in the universe, and walking away from that causes discomfort and some sort of moral pain. And the consequences of not changing is that we will delay our happiness. So if we want to be happy, and if we want to fulfill the purpose of our incarnation, which is to progress towards perfection and to act as co-creators, we must understand the importance of changing our attitudes. So this is what I brought for our discussion here today, with a disclaimer that obviously people might think slightly different. So what I say is take what's useful for you and really dig into the books and read and create the knowledge base for yourself that's really aligned with what you are and what you believe in. Before we finish, I just wanted to say that the Paul and Stephen Spirit Center has a charity project that helps people that are homeless here in Melbourne, in Australia. And what we do is we develop these little breakfast pack and hygiene packs. And during the winter, also warm clothes like socks and scarves and beanies and gloves, so we can assist people that are homeless to be more comfortable and have something to eat the following day. So if you want to contribute to that project, you can donate through our website. And we really want to reach more people. So if you're able and that touches your heart, that cause, just hop on our website or through even our Facebook page. I think you can donate as well. Okay? Well, thank you everyone for your attention and for your time. I truly hope that it made sense, what I was saying, and that you can use that and change your attitude for your own happiness. So we'll finalize as well with some vibrations towards the good, towards love and harmony and peace to all the people that we love and for people around the planet that might be going through challenging situation. So let's again concentrate and connect with our spiritual mentors, thanking them for assisting us during these minutes that we were here together, and asking them to help us transform deeply so we can walk towards our happiness and perfection and contribute in a positive way in creating a better world for all of us. And as we unite in thought, we imagine that from our hearts, we give out a beautiful, loving energy that we ask the higher spirits, despite being a small contribution, that it's taken to wherever it is around the planet that people are in most need. So people that are suffering morally or physically, may they receive this energy of love so they can find hope and faith and strength to persist. We vibrate much love to all the people that influence opinion. May they be leaders, political leaders, spiritual leaders, people of influence. May they understand the power they have through their words. And may somehow they listen to their hearts and to their higher part of their being, so they can contribute to this moment of planetary transition. We also vibrate to all those that we love, our families and our friends. And we finally vibrate love towards ourselves. And may we touch other people's lives during this week in a positive way. So be it. So thank you everyone once again, and I hope to see you next time.